Hi guys, welcome to Unit 8, which is going to be addressing the last five, uh, 10 of the Ten Commandments. This first section, chapter 9, that we're going to be focusing on, is in many ways an extension and a review of what we learned when we talked about marriage. The focus of chapter 9 is on the gift of sexuality. And if we're doing just kind of a brief overview of this chapter, sexuality is at the heart of being human. Human sexuality is a God given gift of goodness. It's essential for procreation and the marital covenant, as we've already discussed in the sacrament of marriage. Um, I think when we say that sexuality is at the heart of being human, I think we sometimes think then that the act of sex itself is all there is to being a sexual being. And that, of course, could not be further from the truth. Being a sexual being means being in the world either as male or female, an identity that we have to acknowledge, accept, and hopefully embrace in terms of who God created us to be. So as we move throughout this chapter, the discussion of sexuality is going to take place under, instead of the sacrament of marriage, under the umbrella of the sixth and ninth commandments. Sexuality, as the Catechism teaches us, is ordered to the conjugal love of a man and a woman. In marriage, the physical intimacy of the spouses becomes a sign and pledge of spiritual communion. Marriage bonds between baptized persons are sanctified by and through the sacrament, as the Catechism again teaches us. And as we've already discussed, there are two purposes for sex in marriage, right? Sharing of love between the spouses and the transmission of life. So sharing of love between the spouses is what we refer to as the unitive aspect, and the transmission of life is what we refer to as the procreative aspect. As we move throughout this chapter, it's going to explain the church's teachings when it comes to sexual intercourse and the reality that sexual intercourse is only moral and according to God's plan if each and every marital act, that is, it takes place within the context of marriage first and foremost, remains open to the transmission of life. So again, sex and sexual act is only going to be moral if it takes place between spouses who are open to the possibility of life resulting from their union. We're going to talk, obviously, in this chapter about offenses against the sixth and ninth commandment. And obviously, if they're against the sixth and ninth commandment about sex, they're obviously going to be against marriage as well. We're going to talk again about adultery, divorce, polygamy, incest, free union, things like masturbation, pornography, fornication. We will also talk about those virtues to counter those vices and counter those sins. We'll talk about the virtues of chastity, purity, and modesty in terms of how we can grow in virtue and grow in holiness and help to combat some of the urges to transgress against the great gift of sexuality that God has given us. And chastity, purity, and modesty are all parts of and related to the virtue of temperance. So they are cardinal virtues, and they are ones that we can build up. And they are virtues that both married and unmarried people need to develop. Okay? So that's a nice overview of what we're going to be talking about throughout this chapter. And to be more specific about what you guys need to be responsible for tomorrow in class, that's Thursday, and moving forward when we get to the chapter quiz next week, we're going to first focus on the goodness of sex. What makes sex good, right? Essentially is what we're talking about. And sex is good, right? It's good because God made it so. God is good, and God made it for us as a way to express the gift of who we are as human beings. He blessed Adam and Eve, right? We go back to the story of creation. Uh, and he said, be fertile and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it, right? He made us the stewards of the earth. I don't want to say we're the authors because we're not, but the author placed us in charge, in his stead, if you will. And when we look at that, God created us, right? First and foremost, God created us, but he created us because of who he is. God is pure love, right? And God created us out of pure love. God made us male and female, equal in dignity, but different. Man and women, men and women, man and woman, men and women, are separate beings. The word sex itself comes from the Latin root word secare, which means to separate, right? Secare, S-E-C-A-R-E, right? And it means to separate. So God clearly made men and women different, separate, distinctive, right? But equal in dignity. And there's nothing wrong with that diversity, that difference that makes them unique. I think we have, in many ways, many people have, not all, have said that if we're equal, that means we're all the same. And of course, that's not what it means, right? Equality does not equal sameness. Equality does not equal no differences, right? Equal just means equal in who created us, right? Equal in our humanity, right? We're all equally human. And God made us complementary, right? Male complements female, female complements male. Together, they're better. I just look at the relationship I have with Mrs. Motley. Together, we are very strong personalities, good human beings, but together we are more, right? My deficiencies are complemented and overcome by her strengths, and her few weaknesses are overcome and grown into strengths through my strengths. We are able to help each other, right? Particularly if you look at it, I am certainly much more rational, and she is certainly much better in terms of handling emotional stuff. And so those two kind of areas of strength, become strengths for both of us because of the complementary nature that we have shared together through the marital bond that we have. Okay. And that idea of sharing, right? If we look again at that story of creation, we were given the task of sharing in creation with God, right? Sex is not all there is, again, in being a sexual being, as I said earlier. Sexuality also involves our spiritual makeup, our emotional makeup. As I've said numerous times, humans are a unity of body and soul, matter and spirit. And sexuality is a way of reaching out to people both to receive and to give love. And so through the sexual act, right, the married person is able to express fully the physical and the spiritual, the unity, right, and hopefully the openness to procreation, right? That's what procreation means, sharing in creation, that God allows us to do. Okay, and so when we look at it, we need to understand a couple of things. First, that sex, as God created and intends it to be used, is profoundly good, right? We need to realize that the sexes are equal, but different in many, many ways. We have to understand that sexual activity and intercourse is only part, right? Only a fraction of what it means to be male and female. And in point of fact, not every person will be called to engage in the sexual act, right? Because not every person is called necessarily to marriage. And so one final thing we need to understand is that God really has put us in a position to express those differences and allow those differences to allow us to grow in strength when we unite. And it doesn't necessarily mean sexually, although it can be sexually within the context of marriage. Unite those differences to create strength. Okay. So you have three questions in your Unit 8 questions, the first three that we can answer. Question 1, what does the Bible teach about human sexuality? And again, we go to the book of Genesis. And in the book of Genesis, it proclaims the goodness of sex. God commands Adam and Eve to be fertile and to multiply. Right? The second question, what is the meaning of the word sex? And again, I told you, it's derived from the Latin word secarre, which means to separate. And the third question of Unit 8 questions, discuss some biblical principles that flow from our sexual nature. Okay, there's a bunch of different answers that you could have for it. Some of them include men and women are complementary beings, right? We are able, and by we I mean men and women, are able to display God's power and tenderness in different ways. And again, I just look to myself and Mrs. Motley. I'm not unemotional. She is not unintelligent or not rational. But certainly I have strengths in the rational aspect of who I am, and she has strengths in her emotional aspects, and the two of us complement each other through those different strengths and together become stronger through it. So that's it for today. We'll pick up again tomorrow. Do yourselves a favor. In your textbook on page number 217, there is a very good exercise, and I would like to spend a minute or two, not too long, taking a look at some of those statements tomorrow in our Zoom meeting after we get situated as far as what Unit 8 is going to look like. So again, take a look at the sex attitudes survey on page 217. And really be honest with yourself. I'm not going to necessarily make you share your answers, but I would like to at least look at the questions and kind of set us on the path for what we're going to be doing in this chapter and in this unit. So that's all we got. I will see you guys tomorrow. Have a good day. Love you. See you. Bye.